spans a few different genres, but I think altogether it just makes for a really interesting story.
I was like, whoever wrote this is going to be remembered as one of the top authors of the early 21st century.
It's like watching a firework display. The spectacle of the artwork itself is what's drawing your attention.
I read it pretty early on and then kept recommending it to people over the last 5 or 7 years. It was like, this is a pretty amazing work of human fiction.
Cloud Atlas is a book that repays the sort of linguistic, generic study that academics bring to it, but it's also just a great story.
Mitchell really plays with the subgenres of literature, and he puts it all together in one book. And the amazing part about Cloud Atlas is it all ties together.
I like so many different kinds of genres. It was like having a sampler platter, you know, like a Whitman sampler box. I was just eating all the chocolates.
A lot of people complain that David Mitchell was trying to show off a little bit by saying, look how smart I am, I'm writing in all these different styles. But like Tom said, he absolutely pulled it off.
You respect the writer for being so ambitious. It's not clear to me that he's pulled off everything that he wanted to do, but you've got to respect the attempt.
I do think that Cloud Atlas defies genre classification. When I try to describe the genre, I generally fall back on conceptual fiction, and it seems to fit loosely in there.
It's this notion of an interwoven narrative throughout time and space.
It's 6 nested stories, and they have some similar themes across the stories and similar characters.
So you go from the oldest story to the newest story, then from the newest story back to the oldest story. So the structural aspects of the novel are very front and center.
In the first half of the book, where you get the fractured narratives, the reader has to go through the book and figure out what's going on for themselves. Then the second half, it's kind of like the aha moments where it's like, oh, okay, I get what he was doing in the first half.
Well, he's doing something which, you know, prose writers have done for centuries, which is to construct a larger work out of a series of smaller stories. What's really interesting about it is that he then decides, okay, I've got this structure in mind, I'm going to deal with it by creating not just different stories, but stories that operate in totally different generic registers. You've got something like the Pacific Journal of Adam Ewing, which is really invested in travel writing of the 19th century and is doing a kind of historical work.
Who does he quote as an inspiration? He quotes an American classic. He quotes Herman Melville and Moby Dick.
And then you've got Letters from Zadelham, which is your Isherwood, Evelyn Waugh sort of style.
The section's written in this letter format, and basically Robert Frobisher is this British musician.
Frobisher is the classic tortured bisexual modernist artist.
Half-Lives, the first Louisa Ray mystery.
It's a pastiche of the airport thriller, but it works as an airport thriller, right? It really is thrilling.
The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish, probably your closest to a mainstream novel, right?
This picaresque novel about a down-on-his-luck aging publisher.
I just really hated Timothy Cavendish.
Really?
Yeah, I had no sympathy.
I kind of loved him.
Then we jump from that to Korea in some, you know, future world, or Fabricants, and Purebloods, a kind of Blade Runner style world.
And Sluicious Crossing and Everything After.
Just straight up post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
There, he's clearly read and enjoyed the sort of subgenre of post-apocalyptic fantasy novels.
Margaret Atwood.
Oh, Atwood.
Very,
yeah,
very
good call.
Atwoodian.
What you get at the end are Mitchell's unique creations that have taken all these distinct elements and combined them into something new and unique.
He's obviously committed to his vision of how he wants to organize the novel, and that means that he has to compromise somewhat with accessibility.
Not to be too tongue-in-cheek about academia, but that's how you know you're going to get read in English departments for decades to come, is if you write something that's tough to read.
It's a good book club book, because I saw in our book club people telling each other, no, don't give up yet. It does get better, you just have to persevere, sort of encouraging each other to keep going.
He expects a lot of his reader, but it's a good kind of expectation because it forces you to engage with the text.
One of the things that makes this such a significant novel and a novel that people love so much is Mitchell's virtuosity with language as well as genre. It's one of the things that makes Cloud Atlas such an impressive work of art.
His voice inhabits a lot of different characters. He manages to speak like a woman, he manages to speak like a man, he manages to speak like a non-human, and he sets them in different times and places.
This is one of the things where Mitchell stands out from other writers. He's able to jump from 19th century speak to some made-up dialect far in the future.
Since he's so nailing the voice of the time and place, there's a sense of sort of drudging through a little bit.
It's certainly one of the dangers of any novel that's constructed out of very different parts, is that there's going to be the question, does it all hang together?
I think it's quite clear that you could read each one of the stories as a distinct story and they would still be interesting, which sometimes makes you wonder, has it really worked as a novel, or am I reading a kind of collection of short stories instead?
That's a real danger with this sort of artwork, and I think it's one that Mitchell avoids, but perhaps only just.
I thought he pulled it off very elegantly. I love the way each story picks back up from the previous story.
He ties them in together in so many different ways. I mean, partly through the reincarnation conceit, the idea that the protagonists of these stories are essentially the same person born again.
I would say what ties the whole narrative together from my reading of it is all the ethical questions that come up again and again in a different time and in a different space, but it's still the same basic questions. Like, how do you treat another person or another being that's come from a different background from you?
One of the things that really jumped out for me was the idea of slavery, and not just in a literal sense, but being held against your will, being forced to do things against your will. That theme, I think, came back in almost every story.
The other theme I think that's important is the notion of interdependence. The way states of mind and psychological dilemmas sort of reiterate themselves through time and space.
When you're reading the book, you're not focused upon the overarching themes of the novel. Most of the time you're thinking about what it's like to read Cloud Atlas, about the strangeness and the wonder and the crazy experience that reading this series of interconnected narratives brings.
Steve called me in 2004, and I'd done a biography of Ben Franklin, was about to publish one on Einstein. He said, why not do me next? I didn't realize he was sick, and so I didn't really turn him down. I just said, yeah, let's do it, but let's wait 20 or 30 years till you retire. And then his wife said to me, and other people said to me, hey, if you're going to do Steve, you got to do him now.